Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to thank the organizing committee, especially for this possibility. I couldn't be there in person, but this is hopefully making up for it. I think it's a commendable effort to try to bring such diverse perspectives on the same topic to the attendees there. And hopefully over time, I'm sure students especially are able to take something at least out of all topics, and over time they will be able to concentrate their efforts into these very interesting multidisciplinary directions. So yes, so I will try to share my side of the story, which is coming from a cognitive neuroscience background. I would like to give you an overview of how we look at our focus of interest is from when we look at social interactions, and my specific interest in the role of physiological predictors in telling us more about what are these factors that govern social interaction outcomes. So to start with, let's see. Yes. So I hope you would all agree that our ability to connect with others is a hallmark of our social living, our social health. And the way we typically study this in the field is heavily using this construct of empathy. So if you were to talk about what processes are involved in connecting with others, empathy comes mostly in mind and has attracted a lot of attention in psychological literature and even neuroscience literature. And the way it has been broadly divided has been into two phenomena, one which is called as emotional contagion, or which is also known as experience sharing, where it is simply the observer's tendency to take on sensory, motor, visceral, and affective states they encounter in others, that is, targets, anyone they are observing. And the other aspect of what underlies empathy or empathic behavior. Okay, so this is an example of what do we mean by taking on others' affective states or sensory states. So this is very nicely quoted by Adam Smith in this book, Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he says the mob, when they are gazing at a dancer on the slack rope, naturally wreath and twist and balance their own bodies as they see him do, and as they feel that they themselves must do if in his situation. So I'm sure many of you would have had a similar experience watching something like that. So that gives you the intuitive feeling about what does experience sharing mean physically. The other aspect of what constitutes or what is thought to constitute empathy is mentalizing or perspective taking, which is a more concrete observer's capacity to draw explicit inferences about a target's a target is anything that you're observing, a person's intentions, beliefs, and emotions. And one phenomenon which brings, in my opinion, both these aspects of empathy or understanding others is the phenomenon of interpersonal synchrony, which is can be loosely defined as a similarity or correspondence in behavioral or physiological responses while connecting with others. So this is a good example of how experience sharing and theorizing or mentalizing about others can be correlated. So this is an experiment in which people were shown recordings of people who were talking about positive and negative events of their own lives. And while they were video recorded, these people in the video were also being recorded for their heart rates. And while participants are viewing these videos, their heart rates are also being recorded. And while they are viewing these videos, they are also being asked to report what they think the target must be feeling in terms of very concrete emotions. For example, here, some have been labeled like what is the, using a rating scale, they were asked to rate how much anger, disgust, excitement, fear do they think the person in the video must be feeling. So what they found was that there was heart rate synchrony. In this case, loosely just the correlation between heart rate time series of the observer and the target was found to correlate with increased accuracy in noting the emotion experienced by the target in the video. So targets were individually also asked to rate themselves the emotions that they were going through. And that was then cross-verified with those reported by the participants while they viewed the videos. So that is known as empathic accuracy. If you could report almost accurately on the rating scale, the kind of emotion that the other person might have felt. And what they found was, like I said, the heart rate correlation was more when the accuracy was more. So indicating that there is some connection between experience sharing or emotion contagion, as well as theorizing or mentalizing about the other persons. And these constructs are highly related. And you can also, this was also one of the instances when you can actually use something as autonomically generated as heart rate for something that is psychologically meaningful. So that correlation, that heart rates can be a window to understanding of others, was also illustrated by this example. But it need not be always physiological parameters. In fact, just spontaneously generated body movements when people are presented to, sit across each other in a room with visual access to themselves, to each other, versus no visual access. They found this experiment in which these people were made to sit close together or far off. So these were the 2x2 different conditions of visual access versus spatial proximity. And they didn't have to do much, but just watch each other when visual access was provided. And what they recorded was the spontaneously generated body movements while people are sitting across each other, and the body movements of individual body parts, which were extracted using machine learning algorithms from the video recordings, using what is known as open source, open pose library, which probably many of you are familiar with. They found the kinematics of body parts, or the movement velocities of individual body parts when plotted like this for every combination. There was high correlation of body parts, mutual body parts moving together as well. And this kind of peak in correlation was found within a couple of seconds of being presented with each other from the start of their being together in the room. So you can see how this is so, there was no instruction to move body parts together, but just spontaneous movements tend to synchronize, and that too so quickly when we are in the proximity of others. This, I thought, may be more relevant to this audience, but so this was also, again, paradigm in which people were given access to each other visually, versus in the another condition, the face was blocked. And they were playing an iterated version of prisoner's dilemma game, in which they had in every trial the option of either choosing to donate some money versus defecting. And the maximum outcome is when they defect, and the other person gives money. So there is a clear advantage in defecting, but the highest joint outcome is when both of them cooperate, right? So in this experiment, what they recorded was the galvanic skin conductance response, or skin, which is basically an estimate of arousal levels in the body. And when you're paying, it seems that when you're paying close attention to the other person's face, there's a significant interaction between the face-to-face block and the cooperation success. And the SCL, or skin conductance synchrony, and face-to-face block is the interaction is significant in predicting cooperation success, which is a joint outcome or joint profit that they get at the end of every trial. Again, suggesting that your physiological parameters can also be affected by not only visual access, which was found in the case of heart rate as well, but it was only the skin conductance response in this case that was indicative of cooperation success or predicting of cooperative behavior. So now that we have some evidence for physiological parameters being meaningful in social interactive domains, we wanted to test whether in more than two people groups, whether our physiological parameters or the synchrony between the physiological parameters of different people in the group can be predictive for a collective decision-making paradigm. And for that, we had actually tested it in a particular context where we are looking at what is known as groupthink. What is groupthink? Groupthink is a tendency for groups to think in harmony. It is a phenomena that occurs when a group of individuals reaches a consensus without critical reasoning or evaluation of alternatives, often arising from the desire to maintain harmony and cohesion. The idea is that members are trying to avoid conflict, feel uncomfortable expressing opinions which are different from that of a group because of fear of disapproval, negative evaluation, or even dismissal from the group. So they tend to go along with the group. And in such a scenario, a construct called team psychological safety is considered to be low. So we wanted to check in sort of semi-naturalistic task where we brought in people in groups of 4 to 6. And when we give them a task that they have to solve together and reach a consensus answer for, are their heart rates, when we look at the synchrony of heart rates between these people, predictive of whether they are able to arrive at the right answer for this problem or not. So we borrowed the idea from, for this task, from what is known as a hidden profile paradigm, which is a very classic task in the organizational behavior literature, where the idea is that you examine the dynamics of shared versus unique information that is distributed across the group. So that means not all people in the group have all the information. Some is shared, which is common to all, but some individuals have unique information, which they don't know that only they have. And during the discussion, it's their job to discuss everything that they know, bring it on the table, and then evaluate the pros and cons of each aspect in helping the group arrive at the right answer. So in this case, we had the task designed around the question of selecting a faculty candidate for a university position, faculty position. And we distributed information about 3 possible candidates in such a way that they each had positive and negative attributes. And if you give them equal weightage, candidate A would turn out to be the best shortlist out of them. So while we got people in the lab, we hooked them with heart rate monitors. We gave them 10 minutes to go through the material, make their own opinion, and then jump into the group discussion mode. They also had a 5 or 10 minute baseline data collected as well individually. And after the group discussion, for which they were given 15 minutes to arrive at one correct answer or consensus answer, they also filled in some post-task surveys, which asked them about their individual experience with working with the team on different parameters like team effectiveness, interpersonal satisfaction, group satisfaction, and how safe they felt talking about their opinions in the group while the team discussion was going on. We analyze this heart rate data using what is known as multi-dimensional recurrence quantification analysis. Not getting into the details of the method itself, but it is a way to reconstruct the time series of different individuals of a group as a multi-dimensional system, reconstruct that state space and see how often that trajectory revisits particular locations in the state space. And each recurrence is dotted or presented as a dot in this plot, which is known as a recurrence plot. And it is the different statistical attributes of these dots on the recurrence plot that help us derive variables, which are the RQA variables. This is an example of 3 participants. We had 3 to 6 participants per group. This is one group which had 3 participants, and on the left side, you can see their heart rate data and their group recurrence plot on the right side. This is a group that was able to arrive at the correct consensus answer. Just to give an illustration, of course, you can't really make out much by looking at the recurrence plot. This is for a group which could not arrive at the correct answer. And it consisted of 4 groups, so 4 members. And this is their heart rate data on the left. What we found is that when we fed this RQA variables to a classifier, we found that these variables were able, the synchrony parameters from the recurrence plot were able to predict whether the groups would be able to arrive at a correct consensus or not with 70% cross-validation accuracy. And we tried a couple of different classifiers and the same result could be obtained. What was interesting was, and that is what actually you see here. So what is shown in the plot on the x-axis are the cross-validation accuracies for different control and task durations. So GD is when the group discussion was happening. So the heart rate synchrony between group members during group discussion was associated with around 70% cross-validation accuracy. When you jumbled the randomized the heart rate sequences, that is randomized during group discussion, the cross-validation accuracy was about chance. For the pre-GD or the pre-group discussion period when we are collecting just baseline heart rate, that is what is shown here, pre-GD. It was not predictive of group outcomes more than 60% of the times. This is a randomized controls. We did a bunch of other controls as well. But what was more interesting was, that this prediction by the group discussion heart rate synchrony was significantly higher than either self-report assessment of at the end of the team function or the baseline heart rates that I just talked about that were collected before the group discussion began. So in summary, the main takeaway for us was, of course, that heart rate synchrony during such a naturalistic, sort of group discussion task itself could be a biomarker of effective information processing in collective decision-making task, which was first. But more importantly, there have been questions about how and why does synchrony emerge at all at the first place, regardless of the modality that we have, like I have demonstrated, be it heart rate, skin conductance, or just spontaneous movements, body movements. The idea that has been proposed, theoretically speaking, which I thought was interesting and made sense, was by Tristan and Frith in this 2015 paper, where they talk about communication in terms of inference about the behavior of others while they are trying to infer our behavior. And this suggests that the infinite regress induced by modeling another agent who is modeling you can be finished if you both possess the same model. And that is the drive for the similarity or synchrony that we see in these different body parameters. Because if there is a shared narrative or dynamic that both brains can subscribe to, they can predict each other exactly, at least for those short periods of time. And that can be, evolutionarily adaptive for us. This solution, according to them, and they gave a whole mathematical framework for it, which of course I am in no position to explain or understand. But this solution is a necessary and emergent phenomenon when two or more formally similar active inference schemes are coupled to each other. Mathematically, the result of this coupling is called generalized synchronization, which I just threw in because I thought it will make some sense to you, if not for me. But what is interesting for me is that this framework can potentially help us understand the cognitive and neural mechanisms underlying successful interpersonal interactions like empathic listening, perspective taking, and conflict resolution. So with that, I will end here and will be happy to take any questions.
So, any questions? Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Very, very nice work. I was wondering, do you think that it would be possible to have people prepare to these interactions, like, I don't know, have a session of meditation before they interact, and whether this would help synchronization? Because we know that synchronization happens more easily on lower rhythms, so with longer periods than very fast.
That's an interesting question. I'm pretty sure somebody has tried that, but what I do remember right now is there have been studies before we ventured into such a very naturalistic discussion format. There have been multiple studies trying to look at synchronization in heart rate and GSR, for example, by making people do synchronized activity like drumming or even singing as a part of a group, as a choir, was found to synchronize people heart rate wise. So definitely, if there are physical drives for synchronizing before the activity like this, you can observe synchrony. But in terms of cognitively engaging with each other and heart rate during that period being predictive of that cognitive behavior, I'm not sure if that correlation has been tested, that meditation necessarily, for example, brings everyone in a state of receiving and listening to each other to an appropriate extent. So that part, I'm not sure if it has been tested, but it's worth investigating.
Thanks a lot for the nice talk. It was really good. At the beginning, you did mention groupthink, but then you also have actually the audio and video recordings you showed, at least mentioned.
Yes. Yes.
Is that the mechanism that they used, or is any other?
So actually the task, okay, we can go back to the. So the task was designed to encourage groupthink because more people had shared information that sort of alluded to the wrong answer. And it was important for those with the unique information, which were a couple or which were in a minority, for them to assert their, not assert like explicitly assert, but basically make their opinion heard. So we didn't analyze the video recordings or the text per se, but the design was such that it is easier to follow groupthink. And if people actually ended up with the right answer, it is only because they could look beyond that and overcome the groupthink. So that was the idea that we were going with.
Thank you.
Well, then I have one Sarika, Sagar here.
Yes.
So earlier you were talking about people sitting together, having visual contact, and that kind of thing you have not done in your thing. I mean, if they sat nearer,
No. So in our case, it was a very, like I said, naturalistic scenario where people are just around a table and they had visual access, of course, to each other. And they were free to move also and, do pay attention, either want to look at each other or not. So sometimes you would see in these video recordings, people are not always staring at the person who is talking. They're thinking, listening, those kinds. So very naturalistic, no instruction was given to them for how they should behave. So it's very likely that it is dissociated from their bodily movements per se. Though we haven't really analyzed that data to see if there is synchrony in that aspect in facial expressions or body movements.
Also, I mean, I know you at some point also talked about, not in the talk maybe, that seeing how this eye movement happens when
Yes. I think looking at gaze and especially pupil size, which people have shown separately in different studies, the dilation and constriction of pupil when we are looking at people while talking to them is a big visual cue that we use to, continuously infer whether the other person is, what is their state of being while they are in the conversation. So these are important visual cues, but yeah, we haven't really looked into that in our data.
At the beginning, you showed this 2x2 matrix where, I mean, not quite a matrix.
Yes, this one, yes.
They are not seeing each other. How do they know that they are far or near?
So far or near is by design, just their chairs are kept closer or farther.
If they are not seeing each other.
Right, it does not really matter much. Yes, so the main behavioral result they got only when they were near and with visual contact. Yeah, the others were just controlled
That's why your first two
conditions.
plots are sort of similar. I mean, not your or.
Yes. So no vision really did not have an effect. But yeah, as soon as visual access was provided, there was some synchrony in their body movements, and it was amplified when they were closer to each other.
And just out of curiosity, my last question is, does this group thing has something to do with James Orwell's novels Double?
Yes, yes, the idea was, from, again, organizational behavior literature. But I mean, you're talking about the fiction, but even in terms of, how accidents happen when people were looking in even different spheres of life, even politics. When they investigate the cause for things that could have been avoided, the idea of groupthink actually emerged from that sort of psychological literature, and politics.